I never imagined that something so seemingly innocent, so simple, so fun could be a direct gateway to the abyss. But I saw with my own eyes what very few have lived to tell. What I'm about to reveal to you is not an entertainment story, it's a warning for your soul and that of your children. If you've ever seen El Chavo del Ocho, write in the comments. I also grew up with him. I need to know how many of us were marked by what seemed like laughter but hid a lie disguised as childhood. It all began during a prayer vigil. The night was heavy, the atmosphere heavy. I felt a different depression, as if an invisible cloud had descended upon my chest. I prayed hard, but something pushed me to cry out deeper, to ask for revelation. It was then that I was caught up in the spirit. I was transported to a dark place, timeless, without natural sound. An unnatural cold enveloped me. In front of me, a realm of confusion stretched out, a place with saturated colors and distorted laughter, as if a satanic circus had been set up in hell. I saw children, many walking aimlessly with dull faces, some crying, others laughing, madly, and in the center, elevated on a rotten wooden structure, there he was, the face we all remember, the same hat, the same threadbare clothes, but his gaze was empty, his smile crooked. It was the boy, but not the one we knew. He had been crowned with a crown of charred paper. He held a scepter made of melted candy. Around him, deformed creatures cheered him, they called him the King of Lost Children. I wanted to scream, but I had no voice. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. It was then that I heard a voice behind me, firm as thunder, soft as wind. Many worshipped him without knowing, laughed with him, grew up with him, but never asked who inspired him. I then remembered what is written, my people were destroyed because they lacked knowledge. Hosea 4:6. We never questioned what we saw, we accepted everything the world handed us on a silver platter. The enemy disguised as a comedy, a creature hunched over, approached the throne, handed him a box of broken toys. Each one represented a child's soul trapped by spiritual ignorance. The boy took them and laughed like an echo emptiness that chilled my bones. I thought about how many homes we open without discernment, how many parents sat with their children in front of the television, thinking he was harmless because he disguises himself as an angel of light according to Corinthians 11:14. I saw Don Ramon chained speechless to the Chilindrina with eyes that kept spinning. Keiko trapped on a hellish carousel of pride and tears. They weren't just characters, they were symbols of human passions, misery, rebellion, vanity. A little girl looked at me. Her face was painted like at a party, but her eyes were empty. She handed me a bingo card with the boy's face on it. It said player number 8. I understood that 8 was a repeated cycle, a prison disguised as eternal entertainment. I fell from kneel. Lord, why did you allow this? I asked. And the voice returned. I warned, but they wouldn't listen. They mocked my servants. They ignored my word and embraced what the world offered them. Then I remembered Romans 1:25. They exchanged the truth of God for lies, honoring and worshipping creatures rather than the Creator. I woke up. Crying, I felt the weight of millions of childish souls consumed by a blind generation. I understood that spiritual warfare isn't only on the altars, but on televisions, cell phones, cartoons, and routines. The crown in hell wasn't of glory, it was of deception. It was the reward of those who steal the attention of the innocent and lead them astray. Anyone who causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble would be better off if a millstone were hung around their neck. Matthew 18:6. From that day on, I never looked at cartoons with the same eyes again. I never allowed culture to decide what is innocent. The Holy Spirit gave me discernment, and my duty is to open your eyes. You too, who are reading this, wake up. Not everything that makes you laugh comes from God. The enemy knows that if he wins, the child's mind will destroy the adult of the future. Childhood is sacred territory and today it is under attack. Today I tell you, break with what the world has called there is no nostalgia in hell, there is only eternal regret. Do not love the world or the things in the world. 1 John, I don't know if you love a program more than the presence of God. Something is wrong. And who are you crowning in your house? The King of Kings or the King of Lost Children? There is no neutrality. Every screen is an altar. Every button you press can open a heavenly door or a hellish portal. Wake up, church. Protect your children. Watch what enters their eyes. Clean your home. Tear down idols. Today is the day to close doors and raise walls of holiness. Don't wait for another vision to do what's right. Eternity has no repetition. After that vision, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of the rotten throne returned. The echo of those laughs haunted me. They weren't real laughter. They were disguised laments. A demonic mixture of feigned joy and eternal torture. I understood that hell doesn't just punish, it also imitates. I began to investigate and pray. More intensity. I asked for discernment like never before, and the Spirit began to show me symbols and connections. Things I had overlooked my entire life. What seemed like just a television series was actually a network of spiritual codes, camouflaged messages, and emotional programming. Each character had a specific role in that infernal structure. El Chavo represented false humility, he appeared poor but had pride. Chilindrina symbolized sweetened rebellion. A girl who manipulated with her crying. Keiko represented envy and narcissism. Don Ramon represented irresponsibility, presented as sympathy. I realized it wasn't just a comedy, it was a narrative designed to normalize chaos, to teach children that disorder is fun. That disrespect is funny. That there are no consequences for lying, yelling, or making fun of others was a school of inverted values. The most disturbing thing was when the Spirit led me to see the neighborhood as a spiritual prison. I had no way out. It was a constant cycle where nothing changed, day after day. The characters repeated the same things. Mistakes, no one grew, no one learned, no one escaped. It was the reflection of millions of lives trapped in cycles of misery and confusion. Because even though they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor give thanks to Him, but became futile in their reasoning, and their foolish heart was darkened. Romans 1:21. That word burned in my chest. How dangerous it is to laugh at what God calls sin. I remembered then how, in my childhood, I imitated Chavo's gestures. I used phrases I repeated without understanding. I hit my friends in games. I made fun of adults. I thought it was funny, but now I understood. I was being indoctrinated. The enemy didn't need open witchcraft. He only needed laughter without truth. The programs that don't mention God, that don't exalt the light, are training soldiers for the opposite kingdom. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. Matthew 12:30. There is no gray area. There is no neutral entertainment. Everything has a source and a purpose. I followed in prayer for days. I felt like my heart was being purified. The Lord showed me that it's not just about El Chavo but about an entire generation raised on empty cartoons, meaningless songs, comedians without eternal purpose. Therefore, come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. 2 Corinthians 6:17. I remembered the ancient altars just as in biblical times parents offered their children to pagan gods thinking they were doing the right thing. Today, the screen is the altar, and many are giving their children's souls over to entertainment without holiness. The sacrifice is silent but just as real. I saw a mother praying for her rebellious son, unaware that for years she herself sat him in front of programs that formed her character. I saw a father crying because his daughter strayed from the gospel without realizing that he let her grow up seeing worldly idols. God is not a king. He cannot be mocked. Galatians 6-7. The pain in hell wasn't just physical, it was psychological and spiritual. Eternal souls were crying out for a second chance. But it was too late. One of them saw me and screamed. I, too, thought it was just a joke. That phrase tore me apart. How many people think life is a game until they face eternal judgment? And hell does have hierarchies. I saw him. The boy with his burned crown wasn't just a symbol, it was an infernal award granted by millions of influenced souls. The enemy rewards those who manage to divert generations, but their reward is also their condemnation, and the smoke of their torment rises forever and ever. Revelation 14:11. I was taken to another chamber where the children's toys burned slowly. Each toy represented a contaminated memory, a childhood moment, sealed by the world. A doll. I repeated empty phrases. A cart spun aimlessly. There I understood the enemy. Mark. From the cradle, I saw myself as a child sitting in front of the television. My face was that of someone hypnotized. My eyes didn't blink. And then I saw a shadow behind the device. It wasn't a human figure, it was an entity. An observer fed off the attention we gave it. It smiled every time we repeated the phrases we learned on the screen. I woke up sweating, trembling. I knew I had to speak. I knew I had to tell what I saw, even if they mocked me. Even if they called me a fanatic. I'd rather be rejected by men than approved by hell, because silence is consent. And I could no longer remain silent. I threw away my old DVDs, deleted files. I cleaned my house. I asked God for forgiveness for every idol I let in without a filter. I begged Him to protect my family, to break every generational curse disguised as popular culture. I promised Him that I would never again surrender my mind to purposeless entertainment. Since then, every time I hear a canned laugh, I shudder every time I see a child repeating phrases from empty characters. My heart cries because I know what's hidden behind it. I know it's not just a show, it's a strategy. It's a design, it's a plan. And while many remain asleep, hell continues crowning kings, kings of confusion, kings of ignorance, kings of the lost. But I chose to serve the King of Kings, and my mission is to snatch every child's soul from the clutches of darkness, even if it costs me my life. After that experience, my life took a complete turn. I could no longer live as before. Every superficial conversation seemed empty. Every joke without purpose sounded hollow. The world kept turning in its blind routine. But I had seen too much to go back. Ignorance was no longer an option. I tried to warn my friends and my family. Some listened attentively, others looked at me mockingly, as if I had become an uncontrolled fanatic. But I knew I wasn't speaking from emotion, but from revelation. The hell that I saw, it wasn't a symbol, it was an active system in operation, recruiting day and night. One of my brothers in the faith confessed to me that he had had similar dreams. In them, he saw animated characters leading crowds to a dark carnival where laughter turned into screams. There I understood that I was not the only one. The Spirit is awakening many with urgent visions before the final collapse. Every day that passes, I notice how the enemy grows bolder. He no longer hides behind masks. He now brazenly presents himself. Movies that glorify death, series that exalt disobedience, music that incites sin with hypnotic rhythms. We are at war, but few want to wield the sword. I became jealous of what I heard, of what I saw. I could no longer allow my eyes to consume content created by minds that hate God. I will not set before my eyes anything unjust. Psalm 101:3. That promise became my shield. Every click had to be a spiritual decision. One day in prayer, the Lord told me. He showed me another vision. This time, I saw a school. In each classroom, the children weren't learning math or language. They were learning relativism, confusion of identity, mockery of faith. And on each desk, a screen, and on each screen, a cartoon. I saw El Chavo again. This time, he wasn't on the throne. He walked through the school halls like a guide. His laugh was different. Now it seemed metallic and robotic. He was no longer the character. He was the spirit that had formed through him. A spirit of lightness that trivializes the sacred, that disguises evil as play. The children followed him, repeated his phrases, imitated his language. Each one was blindfolded, but they thought they were seeing. They have eyes, but they don't see. They have ears, but they don't hear. Jeremiah 5:21. This spiritual blindness is the most dangerous plague of our generation. I was then taken to a packed amphitheater. A large crowd applauded a figure. On stage, there was a fusion of famous characters, caricatures, celebrities, one body, many faces. The audience shouted his name. Entertainment. And behind him, Satan laughed, fueled by worship that wasn't directed at the Creator. I shuddered. I understood that what we call culture has become an idolatrous altar. Everything that gives glory to God is absorbing our energy, our attention, our soul, and every second spent there is a second lost in eternity. I began to preach with more fervor. I could no longer speak of a soft gospel. I had to confront Jesus. Jesus didn't die so that we would play with sin. He died to break the chains of what we embrace today as entertainment. His blood was not shed so that we would become comfortable, but so that we would wake up. Many turned away from me, saying I had become too radical. But I preferred to stay only with the truth rather than with lies. Because he who wants to please everyone will never please God. I now seek the favor of men or of God. Galatians 1:10. One night, while praying for the new generations, I felt an immense weight. I saw thousands of children walking toward a portal of fire in their hands. They were carrying tablets, phones, consoles. None of them raised their heads. They were all like spiritual zombies. I wanted to shout at them, but they couldn't hear me. Then I saw a small group of children stopping. One of them looked up, his eyes watery. On his chest, he carried a wooden cross, and behind him, a bright figure appeared. It was Christ. He didn't shout, he didn't force anything, he just reached out and the child ran toward him. I cried like never before because even though hell multiplies, heaven still rescues. Even though darkness advances, the light has not been defeated. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not prevailed against it. John 1-5. There is still hope for this generation. I woke up with a firmer purpose. It is no longer a time for lukewarmness. It is time to burn our homes with prayer. It is time to cleanse our digital libraries of breaking pacts with the impure. It is time to teach our children to discern. Hell will not release its prey without a fight, but the power of Christ is greater. What I saw with my eyes I will not forget. It was not a nightmare, it was a warning, a commission, and as long as I have breath, I will continue speaking, because the silence of the righteous is the applause of the wicked. And I was not called to applaud, I was called to denounce. This is not just my story. It is a prophetic cry to awaken a sleeping church, anesthetized by easy laughter, entertained by what destroys it. There is still time, but the clock is ticking. And when the trumpet sounds, there will be no more commercials, only judgment. The following days were like walking through a parallel dimension. While people laughed in the streets, entertained themselves in cafes, talked about new series or upcoming concerts, all I could think about was the approaching judgment. It wasn't fear, it was conviction. I knew that the time of mercy had a limit. One dawn during my devotional, the Lord showed me a giant hourglass suspended above the earth. Each grain that fell was a generation, and at the bottom, the last handful of sand was about to fall away. I felt a trembling in my spirit. It was as if the sky was holding its breath. Before the grand finale, I saw churches full but spiritually empty. Pastors preaching motivation instead of repentance. Services with lights, smoke, and screens, but no presence, no fire, no cross. And in the corner of every church, a television was on with worldly cartoons playing for the children. It was as if no one understood what was at stake. I prayed again for discernment, and the Lord told me, the problem is not just what enters the eyes, but what lodges in the heart. Then I realized that it's not enough to turn off a screen if we don't transform the inner altar. Many parents have cleaned their houses but haven't sanctified their hearts. One day on the street, I saw a child wearing a Chavo t-shirt. He was laughing, jumping, imitating his phrases. I felt a mixture of compassion and alarm. It wasn't his fault, he was just the result of an unguarded environment. A seed planted decades ago, now bearing sinister fruit in new generations. I remembered when God told Noah to build the ark, and saw not when it started to rain, but long before. The warning precedes judgment. This testimony I carry is not just another message. It's a tablet from the ark, and saw it's a cry for others to begin building their refuge in the truth. In another vision, I saw an entire generation trapped in a brightly colored cloud. It was an illusion. A distortion. Within that fog, young people were dancing, doing challenges, sharing meaningless content, and in the center, a dark hole slowly absorbed them without them noticing. The enemy no longer needs physical chains. He uses screens. He uses algorithms. He uses cultural idols that seem innocent, and we are not ignorant of their machinations, 2 Corinthians 2:11, but many prefer to call it exaggeration. They prefer to deny the war because the battle makes them uncomfortable. An old man I met at a retreat told me, he never wanted your fun, he wanted your attention. That phrase stuck in my soul because where your attention is, there is your soul, and if you give your soul to distraction, you will lose it before you know it. On another night of intermission, the Lord showed me a great library in heaven. In each book, a person's destiny was written, but some books were stained as if they had been torn from the inside, and a voice explained to me, every worldly influence that is not rebuked alters the eternal design. I cried hard. I didn't know that our decisions here could alter what was written there, but God is just. He gave us free will. He gave us warnings and also gave us the option to cleanse our history with the blood of the Lamb. I saw children being set free. I saw parents waking up. I saw homes burning their old idols. It wasn't a massive revolution, it was a revival. Silently, house by house, heart by heart, but heaven celebrated with each sincere renunciation, with each screen turned off in obedience, because not every sacrifice is visible. Some are given in secret, the father who stops watching what he liked because he understands the example, the mother who kneels to pray while her son sleeps, the young man who deletes his social media to seek God more. Heaven writes those invisible acts with fire. I dreamed again of the rotten wooden throne, but this time it was empty. The paper crown was on the ground, and a strong wind carried it far away until it crumbled to ashes. I asked what that meant. And the Lord replied, where is the true worship? Do idols fall? Then I knew that not all is lost, that hell does not have the last word, that although many have been marked by an undiscerning childhood, there is redemption for every soul that turns to the Father, there is restoration for every child, every young person, every adult who says, Abba, save me. I saw Jesus walking among the rubble of broken cartoons, melted consoles, burned merchandise. His white cloak shone. He touched nothing, but with his mere presence everything was purified. His gaze was firm but full of compassion. He hadn't come to condemn, he had come to restore. I felt a new stage was beginning. It was no longer just about warning, but about building. We had to replace the content that corrupts with the word that transforms. We had to fill the void with worship. With purposeful teaching, it's not just about saying no, but about offering a yes to the eternal. I began to write, to record, to share, not from hatred, but from urgency. Because the same Jesus who showed me the throne of Chivo also showed me the throne of grace. And although hell screams, heaven still calls. And his voice, although soft, is powerful. And so with each word I share, I don't try to create panic. I try to raise awareness. Because there is no worse condemnation than that which comes from negligence, and there is no greater freedom than that which comes from revelation. Since then, every day has been a mixture of burden and consolation. I carry with me what I know many have not yet seen. The consolation is knowing that there is power. In truth, I do not live in fear but with a constant urgency. I know that the enemy does not rest. But neither does he. The Spirit of God does it every time I pass by a toy store. I feel a pang in my soul, not because of the objects themselves, but because of the spiritual atmosphere that surrounds them. Some dolls are imbued with a dense, mocking presence. There are plastic looks that aren't just design, they're doors, and parents, without knowing it, buy them and take them straight to the heart of the home. I saw a house in ruins. Spiritually speaking, everything seemed in order. Physically, but in the invisible world, the walls were covered in black cracks. In every corner, there was a screen on. Prayers were scarce, the atmosphere heavy there. The enemy,